Trevor, how are you?
Patrick, I'm fine.
Good. So look, what's going on here in terms of Sajid Javid apologising? I mean, either say something and stick with it or don't, you know? I mean, does he really think the public care about him saying about cowering away from COVID?
Well, I think that actually the government should take a stand on this sort of absurd abortion of the English language. I think that cowering doesn't mean people are cowardly. It means that you shrink away from danger. And what he's saying, and that's understandable, as you would. But the idea that he was accusing those who have died or have had serious incidents with COVID are cowards, I think is a grotesque abuse of the English language, as I say. And I think that Sajid Javid really did make a mistake by apologising.
Yeah, why do we see this so often now? Because I think there's a wider issue at play here, right? And we've seen it a lot throughout this pandemic, which is saying one thing, and actually you can take it to the bank that they'll probably have changed their mind by tomorrow. They might have changed their mind by that afternoon, you know. And actually it undermines trust and faith, I think, in what our politicians are saying. And it's stuff like this, you know. You can say one thing and you can obviously mean that, right? And then the next day, I'm very sorry, I've deleted the tweet, I didn't really mean it. I mean, isn't it paint a wider picture of a kind of lack of trust and kind of fundamental honesty, I suppose, within the very heart of our government?
Well, I think it's almost worse than that, Patrick. I think it's a vendetta, a feud which has grown up and which basically takes offence at anything that's possible to take offence over, even when it's not possible to take offence, in fact. So you've got people who had nothing better to do, mostly with no background, representing nobody but themselves. They're on social media. They're looking for a grievance that they can pick the scab off, and they just pounce on it. And for reasons which bewilder me, and clearly you too, senior figures, whether they're politicians or simply showbiz fraternity, everybody in public life is immediately going into this sort of cringe position where they give way straight away and apologise. And I think they do the English language and public service an enormous disservice.
Do you not think it's very weak as well? You know, I mean, Margaret Thatcher wouldn't have cowed down to a few rabid lefties on Twitter, would she?
No, and I think that it's this hornet's nest of, as I say, grievance seekers who are buzzing around everything that they can find. What is wrong with the word cower? We as a nation have indeed cowered in front of...
We have been cowering. You know, we've been shackled to the radiator in Chris Whitty's basement for a long time, haven't we?
We have, I think, as a nation, because of Chris Whitty and Sage, we have been forced to cower. It is not us as a people, I think, who are cowering. Yeah. It is the scientists who are telling us to.
Yes, I agree completely. We've been forced to cower, right? And so the idea that Sajid Javid now shows a little bit of chutzpah and says, all right, okay, I'm not going to cower anymore, no more cowering, you know. I mean, the fact is we're being forced to cower as well with this whole pingdemic that's been taking place, aren't we? You know, your phone goes off because you came into contact with someone half a mile away who may or may not have a cough, and all of a sudden we're all locked away, 500,000 people a week, for goodness sake. I mean, we are being forced to cower, aren't we?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister has said, and others too, including Sajid Javid, that we have to live with this, which is the same thing in different words as don't cower. So should the Prime Minister and Sajid Javid and other ministers have to apologise for saying that we have to live with this? Because some people might think that we shouldn't, that like Australia, we should basically put up the barricades and wait until it's all passed over, which of course it never will.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? Now, moving on, we are going to be talking very shortly, actually, to a real-life student who's going to face up to the possibility, anyway, of having compulsory vaccination, essentially, in order to go to university, if indeed she does now go to university. That's kind of the point, isn't it? And we are seeing this more and more now, the notion of basically making everything compulsory. And are you concerned about this, the slippery slope elements of it? Because I even saw another thing last week, I'm sure we all did, our listeners did, in fact over the weekend, where, you know, the government might be essentially tracking how much exercise you're doing and reward you with freebies. You know, if you get that, that's all a bit sinister stuff, isn't it?
Yes, it's Big Brother, isn't it? And I think that it will backfire. I don't think that people will follow it. They might feel that for a few weeks or months it's a fad that they might adopt. But frankly, we need to get back to our normal lives. And I think compulsion of any sort by the government in this way is an invasion of our civil liberties. And the problem is it's a slippery slope. As you say, I think once they begin with this, there is a tendency for them to want to interfere and meddle in other areas of our daily lives. And we already have these behavioral scientists who are using nudge theory or more sinister forms of behavioral therapy to stop us doing things or to encourage us to do things we wouldn't otherwise. It's rather sinister already.
It is. Trevor, thank you very much for your time. As always, Trevor Kavanagh there, political columnist from The Sun.